here is everything you need to know about the First Berserker Khazan and some of the important in-game systems that are what makes this game so unique. First, we're going to touch on the weapons. So the first weapon you get initially is the dual wielding weapons, followed up by the greatsword and then by the spear. These are your three weapons that you'll choose to pick from, upgrade, and skill into as the game progresses. Now there's a couple differences between these. The dual wielding weapons are ideally an up close and personal, very quick attacking weapon that works and scales well with the ability to dodge very quickly, but dish out tons of quick medium damage strikes. The greatsword is great for dealing huge high damage hits that do take a bit longer but are very punishing once you're skilled to play with it. And the spear, which is a great balance of both, allowing you to attack for pretty high damage fairly quickly, but also stay at a distance that allows you to hit enemies from range at a very quick speed. One other thing when it comes to weapons is as you begin to get new weapons, each weapon will essentially scale with a specific skill. You can see the scaling for this weapon's damage, which is based on a number or letter grade, is scaled by those given stats. So willpower and strength for the dual wielding, strength and proficiency for the greatsword, and proficiency and willpower for the spear. This is something once you pick a weapon to scale into, you want to keep in mind when upgrading your stats at the Blade Nexus, because if your primary weapon scales with willpower and proficiency, ideally you may want to put more points there if you plan on upgrading the weapon to its max potential. Now combat in the First Berserker Khazan is somewhat familiar but definitely a little unique, as there are a bunch of different systems in this game that you really ought to learn and master. For instance, the regular attack is going to be your regular square or quick attack. Your potent blow or your heavy attack is going to be your triangle button. Keep in mind again, this can be charged to deal extra damage to enemies. Your breakfall attack, where you can jump down on enemies in midair and actually slam the ground, dealing tons of damage to them. And one of your most important ones, your brutal attack. This will happen when you exhaust an enemy or completely deplete their stamina or focus gauge, allowing you to perform a strike by hitting circle and dealing tons of damage to that enemy while they're vulnerable. This is generally the highest power attack in the game, and you want to focus on depleting enemy stamina or focus gauge, which we'll talk about shortly. But on top of those different kinds of attacks, you'll have other different specific things. One is going to be dodging, which is your regular dodge that you'll use with X to dodge enemy attacks. Another will be guard, where you use L1 to actually block an enemy's attack, which will cost you stamina but can negate a large majority of the damage. And the perfect version of each, which are going to be the brink version. So the brink version of the dodge is going to be a perfect dodge, meaning dodging right as an enemy is about to hit you. This is going to reduce the amount of stamina that your character actually uses, allowing you to perform more dodges or actions this way, and will keep the enemy using more stamina while trying to hit you, ultimately lowering their stamina gauge for you to exhaust them. Additionally, you can also perform a brink guard or perfect guard by blocking at the exact moment an enemy is going to hit you. This will actually deal stamina damage to the enemy, lowering their stamina gauge even more, negating the attack completely and using much less stamina on your guard as well, meaning you can chain multiple brink guards or multiple brink dodges without having to use hardly any stamina. Now each weapon has its own skill tree broken down into 5 different parts that are pretty similar across all 3 weapons that make it easier to understand for a new player. The first category for each weapon is going to be the swift attack. As you can see, the greatsword and the spear also have a swift attack option. This is going to be your basic normal square or X attacks that attack very quick in a succession. Now these can all be upgraded into individual skills, such as whirlwind for the dual wielding weapons, and the ability to upgrade your overall damage and additional strikes for these swift attack combos. Next for each weapon is going to be the potent blow category. The potent blow is your heavy attack that can be chained with other heavy or swift attacks that you can also charge to deal extra additional damage to enemies, as well as dealing extra stamina or guard damage. Again, a potent blow can be charged to deal additional damage and also comboed with additional potent blow skills as you progress this skill line. The third for each weapon will be a specific type for that weapon. For instance, dual wield has frenzy, and this will unlock specific attacks, for instance, while you sprint, as well as different spirit attacks, which we'll talk about in a minute, which are special attacks for that specific kind of weapon. The fourth category is essentially the dodging category for that weapon, meaning you can decrease the stamina cost for dodging with that given weapon. You can also get spirit skills with those weapons, get recovery upon performing perfect dodges, and chain attacks after your dodges, meaning you can essentially dodge and then counterattack the enemy. And the same goes for the 5th category for each weapon, which is the guard skill category. This is where you can deal damage to enemies for performing a brink guard or a perfect guard, as well as chain different attacks after your guard and reduce the stamina consumed upon a successful guard. If you look at it that way, it makes each 3 of these weapon types skill categories and shows you that they're all kind of the same, just with different skills within. Now, stamina is your ultimate resource in this game, and it's your main job to make sure this doesn't get to 0. By performing any action, whether it's running or getting hit, you consume stamina. Once your stamina bar drops to the very bottom level or at 0. At that point, if you get hit, you become vulnerable and you become exhausted, meaning you're no longer able to move until your stamina bar fully regenerates to its max, or you get hit and get broken out of your exhaustion. By being exhausted, you can get hit very hard by many enemies, so it's important you manage your stamina properly and make sure you don't get maxed out to 0. It will most certainly lead to you taking big hits and dying. Now, just like you have stamina, enemies also have stamina, and this applies to them as well. If you actually lower an enemy's stamina bar, like we talked earlier, you can exhaust that enemy, where you can then perform a brutal attack on them for tons of damage. Most of them, if they have stamina, means you can perform dodges and guards on them, so that way they can lower their stamina meter themselves. Then you can hit them when their stamina meter is lowered, allowing you to exhaust them a little bit easier. When charging them, they do the most amount of stamina damage possible, and some enemies that are actually using guard on you, like blocking with a shield or have armor, will require you to do charge attacks to break their guard to be able to actually do damage to them, so keep that in mind. Again, exhaustion is when an enemy's stamina or fortitude meter drops below the meter or to 0, meaning they will be stunned and vulnerable to attacks. Again, the important thing here is before performing your brutal attack, you actually want to get in a couple of regular attacks, whether that be potent blows or normal attacks, so that way you can max out your damage and basically get in a ton of free damage and hits before you do your brutal attack, almost allowing you to double your damage this way. It's also important to manage your stamina before exhaustion. For instance, if I were to exhaust an enemy and have no stamina left, I would have to recover most of my stamina, then attack them, and then do a brutal attack, meaning I'm not going to have time to do many free attacks, and it will cost you a ton of damage this way. Instead, you want to make sure you're timing exhausting the enemy with as full of a stamina meter as possible. That way you can chain your attacks immediately and start dealing extra damage right out of the gate. Next will be the staggered state. This is where an enemy isn't exactly exhausted, but you're able to keep attacking them because their character model is essentially defenseless or staggered. If your attack actually exceeds the enemy's poise, you can essentially stagger them over time with enough hits. Different attacks vary in their amount of stagger, but enemies typically have more poise while they're attacking. So when an enemy is attacking you, if you're attacking them straight back, you aren't able to stagger them nearly as easy as if you were to dodge or block their attack and then attack them. Most enemies over enough hits can be staggered, allowing you to get in a bunch of hits for free without them being able to really fight back. So countering properly and attacking enemies when vulnerable will generate the most stagger and stamina or fortitude damage. Additionally, you can up those numbers even greater by attacking an enemy from behind. Enemies from behind actually take more damage in all regards than they do up front. So if you're able to get behind or use a skill to get behind an enemy, you can deal much more damage to them from behind this way. Next, we have spirit skills. Spirit skills are activated by using your left trigger and can do an insane amount of damage to enemies. For instance, one of the early ones you'll start off with is your spear throw. Once you throw that at enemies, it actually does a ton of damage. Most skills will use one spirit unit to actually cast a spirit skill. Different skill trees, like the common skill tree, have specific spirit skills, but each weapon set also has its own specific spirit skills as well. Those will be identified by showing resources used in one spirit, meaning you can perform a spirit attack or spirit combo with the actual weapon of your choosing by speccing into this. Additionally, as you attack enemies over time, your spirit gauge will naturally replenish, giving you more spirit gauge units to perform more attacks. But in each weapon skill tree, there are also different skills that allow you to gradually recover additional spirit gauge units, meaning you can stack them and replenish them much faster when speccing into some of these skills. Two insanely important mechanics in the First Berserker Khazan are reflection and the counterattack. The reflection is activated by hitting L1 and triangle together. This will essentially reflect the enemy's attack. Arguably, reflecting attack is one of the harder things in the game, but it's extremely rewarding. This parries the enemy's attack and deals significant stamina damage to them, making them exhausted very quickly. And it also essentially stuns or disables briefly the defensive actions of any enemies, meaning you deal a ton of stamina damage to them and then are able to hit them for a bunch of damage afterwards. I would recommend practicing this. This is one of the best and probably OP mechanics in the entire game. A quick tip for reflections is instead of hitting L1 and triangle just before the enemy's attack, to time your hit exactly with theirs. What's a little bit easier is if you just hold down your guard button while targeting the enemy and then getting ready to attack them to meet their attack directly while hitting triangle from this position of guarding, instead of trying to hit them both at the same time, which sometimes will just result in a regular heavy attack. One thing to note about reflection is burst attacks, grab attacks, and other certain normal attacks can't be parried. This is where counterattacks will come in. Counterattacks are primarily meant for timing with burst attacks from enemies. If you can time this successfully from a burst attack from an enemy, as you can see here, it will actually break the stance of that enemy and stagger them, meaning they'll be incapacitated. It restores all of your stamina and then will allow you to go to town hitting enemies with tons and tons of free damage while they can't fight back. Where reflection is great for most regular attacks in most cases, where that's not viable, most of the time counterattack will be. Another important thing is timing and boss attack patterns. You want to make sure when you're fighting enemies, you're not just fighting them, but you're focusing on learning their attack patterns. A lot of these boss fights in this game actually get very difficult, meaning you should learn to focus your timing for your reflections and deflections, for instance, as well as your brink guards and brink dodges, while also learning the enemy's attack patterns, because trust me, you're gonna need to know them. Small attacks like grab attacks will look just like any other regular attack with just a very small difference, but can be really hard to spot unless you're specifically looking for it, and can result in you getting hit with tons of damage and even one shot by some bosses. You'll be introduced to different gear sets very early in the game, and gear sets are very, very important. For instance, the Hound gear set will be available very early in the game and will give you, with just 3 pieces equipped, 5% damage increase and 10% stamina recovery rate. This is actually a huge bonus considering when you upgrade your stats, if you upgrade your endurance by 1 point, you actually only get 1% of stamina recovery rate. So 10% is a pretty large amount. The same works for weapons, as you can get those in a set as well, and even your hotkey items, some of which, like this Tier Summon Stone, allows you to retrieve the Lacrima loss from your most recent death, which is essentially your experience you drop upon dying, a Vitality Shard, which allows you to temporarily increase your stamina recovery rate, which is great against bosses, Soul Tier Dust, which restores your health and grants you free experience, potions that reduce effects or ailments that are put on you, and even things like the Fire Enhancer or other ailment items that allow you to apply an ailment to your weapon to deal extra damage, which in this game gives you a ton of extra DPS. Another thing to keep an eye on is these red rocks. As you start to complete different missions, throughout the missions there will be these red rocks that you can find and break. You want to make sure you're finding and breaking every red rock in each area. As you can see there in the top right, essentially later on in the game, this will be used to upgrade the amount of healing potions you carry. So where we're only able to carry 3 currently, eventually you'll be able to carry many more. And in order to upgrade those, which is completely important to being able to beat the game, you need to make sure you're looking and finding these and not missing them. The upgrading system is just like a Souls game. As you fight enemies, you essentially accumulate gold, which you can spend to buy things. But as you fight enemies, you also get Lacrima, which is essentially like your XP. This over time you'll build up, and you want to make sure when available at a Blade Nexus, if you have enough to upgrade your stats and invest in a level, you want to make sure you invest right then. Essentially, if you die and lose your Lacrima or XP and then die again without retrieving it, it will disappear forever, meaning you've lost out on all that experience. So it's good each time you go to a Blade Nexus, if you have upgradable currency available, that you spend it on your upgrades. Later in the game, you're able to find rare materials. They'll actually allow you to respec your passive points whenever you want. Those are all the big mechanics and systems you need to know in the First Berserker Khazan. If you enjoyed, like this video, subscribe if you're new, and let me know what you're excited about for the game in the comments, and whatever you do, do not miss this.